Welcome to another edition of What the Fuck happenings in and about the area of, I don't know, was inmendham there. Do not God now or something. Who cares? Regardless. Thinking this week, I watched Benatar did another interview with that cosmic skeptic guy. And it was almost unwatchable, just because it got into all this, well, how does a dead person know they're benefiting from not being alive? And, it's just, how can somebody who does exist not exist if they're existing in the non-existence of their non-existence? It doesn't, it's just a waste of time in terms of a way of metaphoring the simple fact that if you don't have a need, you don't have to satisfy a need. If something isn't broken, it doesn't have to be fixed. If you can't be sad, you don't need to be happy, right? If you can't be in pain, you don't need to be pleasured. The negative does come first, and that's really what the asymmetry argument is, in my opinion, or a version of it, or however. I mean, they go through all this jargon, and it's just jargon. So I was thinking also about the imposition argument, and another way of stating it, clarifying even. So even if we conceded the existence of the life worth living, okay, that there is somebody on earth and it would be worth it to live their life, that is, to experience all their experiences and be the asshole that they no doubt are, because I can't really imagine any of these perfect people living their perfect life. Are there even a life I would live? I mean, there's just, there's just nobody I admire enough to say, gee, I'd want to live their life. Because if they're having a good time, they're probably having it in a unethical way. So there's nothing to admire, because it's they're creeps or jerks or something else not good. So if they have the bigger penis, they got a fatter butt, that kind of thing. There's always some drawback that comes with being that person. So I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't wouldn't trade places, first off, and I certainly wouldn't, if I was nowhere, say, oh, I just can't wait to get back to Earth to be that asshole. But anyway, let's just say there was such an asshole. There was some person who was just too cool for words, and just, well, wow, that's just too perfect a life, and he was so perfectly lucky, and he never got sick, and he never had any problems, and he never had horrible grief, and he never had to watch somebody he cared about die, and all that kind of crap. Still, the imposition argument is essentially saying that to have that life, you can't make a slave to have it. So you can't make somebody else a slave to that. So we know that if you're going to have that one happy person, you're going to have to create some other people. And that's the consequence. That's the trade-off. So the imposition argument still works, even if you don't believe in the asymmetry, even if you think life is hugely profitable for the happy people, the life lovers, the pro-lifers, claim they're having marvelous lives that are well worth living, and that it's a charm to the universe that they exist, and the universe is so much better with them in it. All of those kind of arguments still are useless in the face of the imposition argument, because you're still saying, but I'll risk imposing horrible pain, suffering, and torment on the individuals that you can't prevent from existing to have these perfect people. These perfect people come with the price that there'll be a bunch of imperfect people, and you're imposing on them. So it's no different than the slave owner saying our comfort, our nice comfortable lives where people clean up our messes and make our meals and do all our dirty work, and we get to just sit around and talk about how charming we all are, and we can smell better and have pretty dresses, and just everything's nice and clean and pretty and fun. and there's none of the nasty bits of life because somebody else is cleaning up all the messes and doing all the drudgery, and is being whipped and tormented and tortured and killed even for your comfort. Now most people on earth, I'd say most, well, you know, it should be most anyway, would say that yes, you can't make slaves. Slavery is evil. It's just wrong to impose the burden on one individual so another individual can be comfortable. You can't make your shoes, you know, out of somebody else's hide, or your lampshades or anything else. Yeah, you can't profit at somebody else's loss. Can't take it from them, can't steal it. And that's what procreation involves, is essentially making some determination that your prodigy is worth it. That because they're going to be so charming, because they have you to charm them, you know, your charming genetics and your charming personality and your charming parenting skills, that you have all this charming capacity and all this charming ability, and you're going to you know, create this monster. Well, what comes with that is all the people that fail doing the same thing. And so how do we give you your right to make your little perfect child when we know that right comes with the burden of all the imperfect? And so again, the imposition argument couldn't care less about this notion that people might have in their head that things living, you know, doing this day-to-day thing is some necessary function. Necessary, sort of an interesting word. You know, that in, like I said, you can't really have a necessity if there's nobody here to do the it's necessary thing. You know, you have to explain why it's necessary, and the only way you can make something necessary is because it prevents harm. Well, existing doesn't prevent harm. That's clearly obvious, right? I mean, couldn't that be just stated as a statement? Existing doesn't prevent harm. It just doesn't do that, right? It makes harm possible, right? Isn't that the simple truth? So then you have to say that somehow existence does produce something that, although its absence is not harmful, because it really can't be, right? It's absent, therefore it's harmful. You can't say that. Nothing's being harmed, so you can't really say it's harmful, right? If the human race didn't exist, like the Martian kind of question. Now, if you have a theory that the Martians are all waiting in jail somewhere to get out of jail and be made alive, and that they're being harmed and whipped and tortured in their purgatory, yeah, well, that's a fantasy theory, right? It's just nothing to base that on except your delusions of reality, not anything that could be argued as a fact. So that doesn't work as an argument. So anyway, so just, you know, you can just play with these ideas of what's the first cause in this, you know, notion of motion or of function. And there just isn't any. The cause really is, when you're alive, the cause is, don't change anything, don't mess anything up. You know, I need to be here. I need to have some sense that I'm going to be here to finish this video. I sort of need to. And there's a few other things I want to get done before I'm dead. And so, yeah, I need to get those done. I want to. I want them. I desire it. And that's all there really is, right? The universe doesn't desire it. Certainly 90% of the people on Earth don't desire that I complete my mission here. You know, they think my mission is some horrible thing. So they're not on my side at all, in this sense that I need to do it. It's just something in my head, and once my head stops doing it, you know, it kind of evaporates. Now, there are some tangential people who will be affected if I don't exist anymore, and their life will become more complicated or scarier or, you know, some other negative thing, and so that's another need. But that's just another need in their head. So if we get rid of their heads too, then we can eliminate all the need that creates any need for me to exist. So it's almost like a grave in a graveyard. Why does it need to be there? Are there any people that need to see it? You know, are there any people who need to stand over and go, oh, I acknowledge you. You mean something to me. When they don't mean anything to anybody anymore. And they don't need to be there anymore. The grave isn't serving any purpose anymore. It doesn't have a function because it's not cleaning up a mess. It's not fixing somebody's psychological need to make contact with the thing they were dependent on. So all need is evaporated. And you could argue that the need in grief is the same as the need to create. It's just completely dependent on there being somebody to grieve, somebody to miss it, somebody to say, my life isn't complete. But the universe isn't like that. The universe isn't sitting there saying, I'm feeling, what's going on, and I can be hurt if there isn't humans on Earth. It's just not possible. It's not possible for it to be a negative. It's not possible for it to be a degrade in the function. It's just not possible to make that make sense. Because there's no dependent. There's no person that knows what that grave is, what it would represent, how it would be a bad thing. Can't possibly, because there isn't anybody dependent on it. There isn't anybody that needs it to function. It's nothing that can feed off of it. It's not food. All right, this is all just this verbiage, this using language to try to explain something that's, I can say it simply. I can say, yes, that's all we really are, is fixing problems. And we think those are solutions, and so we think they're positive. So if I break my leg and then I find some way to fix it, make it unbroken, go back in time and prevent the breaking of my leg, I'd say, well, that's a good thing to do. That's a real positive. I went back in time and I prevented myself from breaking my leg. Excellent work. I think I did something positive when all I did was undo a negative. I didn't make something truly positive. I just fixed a negative, and I could just argue that everything we perceive as a positive, there was a negative that preceded it, and that even our passions, love, whatever that is exactly. Again, these are problems, that need a fix. You need a fix. You need a solution to the problem of being in love, not the benefit of being in love, or needing, or being dependent. And so it's just getting your fix so you can go back to feeling undistracted and uncompelled and undriven. Now, I'm not saying that it doesn't have some perceptual, like your superficial perception of the event of your arousal as positive, because it seems positive to be hungry. Well, you have the opportunity to satisfy the hunger easily. It's a kind of a positive thing, not a negative thing. But what is the positive made of is the fact that there's really happening inside your system is that you're having a stress relief. You're having the stress of the hunger is being relieved by the perception that, oh yeah, all I have to do is go upstairs, and open the snack box, and and so you're imagining something pleasurable, and that in a sense is fun. Like a lot of other things you imagine, scenarios you might imagine, the hot neighbor chick or something, and you might imagine certain things, and you'll find that process pleasurable because basically it's fixing your problem of needing, and you're imagining a solution, and just even imagining the solution is a partial solution. It mitigates against the pressure of the negative, and so you don't see it as well because you're able to imagine your way through it, to navigate it in a sense. And so but it's fundamentally, I could argue that this is a common kind of syndrome. It's some kind of whatever, the Helsinki syndrome or whatever, the captive, and they become sympathetic to the cause even though they're being abused by it. because in a sense it's sort of like the prisoner who's, you know, bargaining, and he's you know, bargaining for any relief from his pain. He's not being given something positive, he's being given less negative. So it's like the slave, and you whip him every day, and then you start bargaining for less whipping, and the slave will see this as winning, you know, because he's digging his way out of less, you know, more horror to less horror. And it's a perception of advancement, but you're not getting somewhere in terms of a positive. You're just getting less negative. And that's how we function. We're born broken, we're born in need, and we're constantly chasing solutions. And we have this perception that making a solution somehow means that we are rising above, we're making a profit, when all we're doing is limiting our losses. All we're doing is fixing things that are broken. Something I can say that. It's a simple metaphor for me, that yes, we just come here, our existence makes a mess, and your whole life you're just cleaning up the messes, the things that are going to be negative. You're building shields against them. You're building weapons to kill them before they can cause you a problem. It's all prevention for you. Your whole life is sort of built around preventing negatives, and yet people walk into procreation as if that's preventing a negative, when no, it's completely not like anything else you're doing, because you're opening the door to negative. You're inviting it in. You're making a mess. So, but that happens with a lot of people. You know, the charities, for example, you know, they have this perception that the problem is, you know, they can fix it easy and simple, and the simple solution doesn't work at all. Like feeding the hungry. I mean, I don't want to push the point too hard, but I mean, it just doesn't work, because you feed them, but their lifestyle is unsustainable. That's why they're starving in the first place, is because their parents didn't build the nest. Okay, there's no infrastructure, and so you feed them, and they just make more babies that you have to feed in the future, because they still don't have anything called an infrastructure. They still don't have any mechanism to take care of the fact that they need food. And so you just perpetuate the problem, or expand the problem, make the problem even bigger, by preventing the cancellation of the bad behavior. You know, you're preventing the extermination of something that doesn't work. You're preventing its unsustainability from saying there's no way you can do this unsustainable thing. You're just keep moving the brick wall, and by moving the brick wall, you're just building up more crap to bang into it eventually. You're just moving the wall away from the thing coming at it, and the thing coming at it is growing as you're moving the wall. So you're not really accomplishing anything, because eventually you're going to end up in a crisis again, and you're going to have to fix it again, and fix it again, and fix it again. So that doesn't work. You can understand how some solutions that seem like they fixed it didn't fix it. It seems like the right thing to do, but it only seems that way superficially. If you understand the problem, then you know that doesn't fix it. And if you know the problem is in you, if you need to have kids, that's your problem. And you're going to invite more problems to fix that problem. You know, problems that you won't be able to fix if you're unlucky at all. And the real problem, though, here, so again, I'm having this conversation as if this is a philosophical subject, and in a sense, the people having kids aren't listening to philosophy. They're not doing philosophy. They're just being sheeple. They're just doing this social thing. You know, and they're doing this, what's my culture say I should do thing or something. They're not giving it any real thought in terms of what's the real consequences. They're not even thinking about the consequences on their own life, because they almost as silly as, you know, people who get a puppy and say it's so cute and it's so, and they don't realize it's going to grow into a dog. Okay, and the dog's not going to be as cute. It might not be as fun. It just might be work. And then they find out, well, I didn't want a dog. And then they just throw it on the street, because they can do that with dogs, but they can't do it with kids. But there are people who actually do that, right? I mean, they have kids and they say, gee, I really don't want this problem, and force society to fix it. So the problem is that, talking about it's great, but the only reason to talk about it is to talk about how to get to the people who aren't listening anyway, to control them, to get the people who talk about it, the thinkers, to collectively say we have to do something about the non-thinkers, because it's not the thinkers who are the problem. And so that's the argument I've made about the fact that there's all this evidence that all the civilized cultures are already choosing, okay, to not make as big a mess, and to actually end making messes. Their domestic population growth is in decline, and the decline leads to extermination. So if they don't change their behavior, the behavior they've become comfortable with as civilized people won't lead to the continuation of their existence. And so it's that's just a fact. And but that doesn't change the world equation, because there's a whole bunch of dumbasses who aren't doing that higher mind thing. They're thinking with a really dumb mind. And the irony is that a lot of these intellectuals are Buddhists, and it's just so funny, because it's like that religion obviously hasn't done anything to save the world from overpopulation. So even though they somehow understand how life is a trap and, there's no good answers, except escapism, they're thinking, well, yeah, I'll just make a kid so he can be an escapist too. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. So, I mean, even the people doing the thinking aren't thinking very well. But anyway, the point is that that's the solution. So you don't feed it, but yeah, people can acquire the right behavior without even having the right intent. And so the solution is, in my opinion, is getting people to understand that they shouldn't allow children to be produced through acts of recklessness, acts that are no better than drunk driving, acts where they have decided to have children without fairly understanding the consequences and the burdens. And some of that can be imposed by just recognizing that if you do choose to, you're choosing this path, that maybe you should be paying for it. So it seems like these different little pieces of policy that could be implemented would clearly discourage the behavior. So if they only taxed people who had children, that is, if you had children sometime in your life, you get taxed to pay for public education. And if you don't have children, you don't get taxed for it. I mean, this is huge. This is, where I'm living, it's $6,000 a year probably. I mean, if you take out the portion of taxes that are for property taxes that are for maintenance of families, it's probably 3/4 of your property tax burden is paying for somebody else's kids. Huge, giant pile of money. And it would be even huger if you're taking it only from the people who have kids. Then their burden's going to be even higher. Because they have to pay it. They can't steal money from people that didn't create the problem. And it wouldn't be any different than if society spent a whole lot of money, like $6,000 a year, to subsidize having pets. I'm sure the non-pet owners would figure out, well, why am I paying for that? I mean, I don't even feel like I mean, even if I wanted a pet, I can't afford one. So why should I be taxed to pay for somebody else to have a pet I can't even afford to have? That doesn't make any sense. That kind of thing. And, that's what kids fit into, that kind of category. Huge burden you got to pay for. And it's not a problem you made, not a mess you made. You're going to get punished for the decision somebody else made. And if you put the punishment on them instead, and not allow them to steal from other people, to spill their mess on somebody else, to impose on other people, because they've made a choice that they can't pay for, that they can't take full responsibility for, and they're imposing the responsibility on somebody else for their decision. And that's fundamentally wrong. I mean, it should be like a constitutional thing, that you're not allowed to steal from minorities, those people who don't get married and don't have kids, and they do it because they don't want them and they don't think that's the right thing to do. I mean, it's violating my philosophy essentially, and I'm being forced to finance it. Well, that's kind of silly. You know, shouldn't work that way, ideally. So that kind of thing is what people really need to be motivated to do, is to change the law, the policies, to make people more aware of this decision will affect your life. You're not going to be able to pass it on to some sucker, Uncle Sucker, to pay for it. The mess you make will be your mess, and you'll have to at least pick up a substantial portion of the burden. You won't be able to just say, my kid's autistic, waste a few $100,000 giving him a tutor through his whole life. You know, let's pay somebody to stand over him and say, don't pick your nose. You know, I mean, the world really is that fucktarded now. You know, make them pay for it. Make the ones who took the risk take responsibility for the risk they imposed. Make it painful enough so that other people might have a little bit of pause before they just jump into this free lunch of, I'm going to have a baby, and if it goes wrong, it's your problem. You know, that's just bullshit. So yeah, but now the problem with the politics is there is no rational politics, right? It's not a party thing anymore. The two parties are both out of their minds, distracted by subjects that are so who the fuck cares, obsessed by notions that just can't work, you know, 100% capitalist and, you know, 100% socialist kind of thing. And, you know, the right answer is a mixture of the two. You know, capitalism without inheritance, okay, without monopolies, you know, without dirty tricks. I mean, obviously you have to regulate capitalism, or it just becomes Bill Gatesism, you know, where I'll just destroy the competition before it even starts to grow. You know, kind of nonsense. I'll just buy a company and ruin it. You know, and obviously capitalism can't work if you allow that to be the mantra, the theme, all of the shenanigans. So anyway, so politics gets kind of tough because there's no political party that's going to be willing to do what needs to be done, because they're both serving the majority, and there still is a majority of deluded religious kooks, and a majority of Pollyannas, and a majority of people who don't want to fix anything. They don't want the solution. They want to just, you know, pay over time and just make some sort of token effort, but no real effort to fix it. They don't want to do what fixing it really requires. They just want to put their band-aids on things and pretend, I did my job, I band-aided it. You know, I created a charity for a cause, and the charity spends all the money on signs and t-shirts and walks and food and pizza and all kinds of crap, and actually raises no money at all for the cause. So and that's sort of the political system. The political solutions don't have anything to do with fixing anything. They just have to do with making people think they fixed something. So that makes this whole project that much more difficult. Is that you can't just say, you know, vote anti-natalist, because there's no way to do that. And you know, vote to fix the problem, because the other two political parties aren't interested in doing that. So it's the whole create the third party thing, and that's a bigger job. And, you know, fairness first. That's, you know, would be my choice of a name. And someday maybe I'll try to get that moto going, because it's the necessary step, is to just put a couple of these little tiny things in place as policies, and you can do so much to discourage the behavior. If you start imposing a little bit of punishment and responsibility on the reckless procreators, you really decrease the number of humans being created. And because, like I said, the people that have any kind of thought process are already intimidated by the risk. They can actually spend a minute or two before they'd make this decision and think about, well, what if it goes wrong? And what if I love my wife, sort of, but I've seen some other chicks that are kind of hot, and so maybe this relationship isn't even durable. Do I really want to be stuck here for 18 years? And then, if I do decide to, switch which kind of, rag I polish my penis with, am I going to have this huge financial burden for a kid that I'm not even going to see anymore? Do I want to get in? So I'm just saying, that's what people who get a high school education and shit, that's what they actually think. They start thinking about, well, kids are expensive. I mean, even though I'm dumping most of the cost onto the public, the public dole is going to pay most of the price, I still got to pay a lot. And do I want my life diminished? And do I have any skills anyway? Do I have so much free time to spend educating my kid? Do I really want to do that, or do I want to chase chicks? I just, it doesn't take much thinking, especially for the average male, I would say. It doesn't, you have to really be really stupid to think you're going to win. You're going to profit from having kids, but you're really not even close. I guess they have some perception that if they have kids, it makes them look like they have a bigger penis or something, but that's really, you have to be really dumb to think that's working. That some single guy, imagining his next adventure, is all envious of your life. Like there's any chance that he has any envy as you walk down the sidewalk with your kid on his little plastic scooter, pushing a stroller. Like some guy is actually going, oh gee, I'd want that life. I can't wait till I get to go down the sidewalk pushing strollers. I mean, it's just such a fun thing to do. I mean, I just can't imagine a better fun time. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can. Pretty easily. Well, anyway. So I'm just saying, anybody who thinks at all, I mean, has any kind of, like the brain is moving at all in there, like there's any kind of neurology working, is going to step into having kids with some kind of, well, I better think about that. At least say that much. Well, I better think about that, because that seems like there's a lot of burden to that whole project. I have to have a job, and I have to do a lot of stuff to be able to do that crap. So, I mean, a lot of this problem goes away. And, the whole welfare system is obviously being abused. A bunch of sharks are sitting there, they get the chick pregnant and steal some of the welfare money. And, it's a whole racket they're playing. And, obviously we should have laws that put those people in jail. They shouldn't be walking free after the mess they made. The social mess they made. They should be forced to go to a work camp, frankly, and pay for their damn kids. The responsibility should be imposed, draconianly. And I think even most people would agree with that, right? I mean, if you put it to a public vote, I think most people would say, yeah, okay, these dudes who think they can just, play this game of, whatever, put a bunch of buns in the oven and make a living doing it, make a profit. Those assholes, yeah, they should be getting what they deserve, and what they deserve isn't to walk around with a bunch of money. They stole from the fact that we have to give people who have kids money, or their kids end up dying, and it makes us look, evil, mean, unkind. So anyway, so yeah, these are probably the subjects that I should be talking about more, because those policies are what's really going to get the job done. And the philosophical argument, doing things for the right reason, I'm all for it. So I'm all for people voting to stop procreation because they want to stop making horrible mistakes. They want to stop making creatures that are going to suffer. They want to pass a law against Dr. Frankenstein. This whole notion that you can control the experiment when it's not a controllable experiment, and that you really are creating people who will be, just by misfortune, by the misfortune of their genetics, or the misfortune of something went wrong in pregnancy, or the misfortune of just meeting the wrong people and having the wrong events happen in their life, and they end up addicted to drugs or some other thing. They get, herpes, and they get all kinds of, the bad cases, the lives you wouldn't want to live for real money. You couldn't pay you enough to live those lives. Until you can prevent them, there's just no ethical reasoning that makes having kids justifiable, because you have no right to create those slaves to what you're imagining this positive to be. And the positive, again, can be argued, doesn't even have any real value. It's just some perception that you're rising to heaven, and all you are is rising out of hell. You're just reducing some negatives. You're not gaining anything positive. You haven't made any profits. All you've done is paid some debts. You're not winning. You're still way behind. You went from last place to second to last in place to third from the last. But you're not even close, because there is no winning. Because every time you move ahead, somebody else moves behind. That's another problem. The whole problem of everything that we gain gratification from is basically stealing it from somebody else. If you marry the hot chick, then some other guy is going to be out of luck. That kind of thing. You just can't play this game and win in any winning kind of way, because every time you win, more than one person might be losing, because you might not be very good at winning. It's like the rich people. A lot of the rich people absolutely suck, right? They win, and they're such poor winners because they don't use their winnings to do anything good in the world. They just squander it, buying F-15s so they can fly under bridges and break laws and do all kinds of shit that, build yachts that they only use 15 days, in 10 years. All that kind of nonsense. They just squander it and waste it and piss it away on nonsense and bullshit. Which should also be a crime. Yeah, so I don't know how much to push this. I mean, I guess it's got to be stated in some platform kind of way. We can list all these little things that can be done, what little laws can be implemented to impose more responsibility, to make reward and punishment more effective in deterring stupid behavior. And clearly I would like to do with rewards, encourage people by rewarding them, like rewarding people who don't have children by taxing them less. Makes perfectly good sense to me. But obviously if you tax them less, you're taxing the bad guys more, the bad doers and evil doers, the procreators. So in some cases it's not possible to reward without punishing, and so that's just a fact of life. But the fact that you think you can fix it without rewarding and punishing, that would be really stupid, because that's really the way to fix it. I mean, it's a nice ideal to think we can convince everybody to be a decent human, but you can't convince everybody to be a decent human. That's why you have to put signs up that say $50 fine for littering, is because there are people who just can't figure it out on their own. They just, I mean, I've seen them on the street. They just sit there and throw their garbage right out the window in front of your house. They're just so fucking rude. You're just saying, how can they shouldn't, you know, they shouldn't be allowed to live in a house and have a yard if you're going to do that. You just, you know, you shouldn't be allowed to. You shouldn't be allowed to drive a car. I mean, if you can't figure out you don't drop your litter out the fucking window, you shouldn't be allowed to drive, frankly. Well, anyway, I'm not advocating for that draconian a law, but I'm just saying that clearly that would discourage the behavior. So if we make the price people pay personally for the risk they're taking, make it commensurate, then maybe they'll get a clue, and maybe they'll think about it, because they'll see how ruined other people are by this recklessness. You know, these people are almost proud of their autistic children, and you're saying, what are you proud of? You made a horrendous mess. You committed an awful, horrible act. There's nothing for you to be proud of. You took a terrible risk. The part of the risk came true in terms of you got the negative result, and now you want me to think you're a hero? No, you're a villain. I mean, you know, but our society is so backwards that it thinks these are people worthy of sympathy, when no, they're worthy of ridicule. Why'd you take the fucking risk? You knew it was possible. Now you're whining about the outcome, and oh, how'd that happen? Well, it happened statistically, you dumb fuck. Or you thought you were immune? Well, why'd you think that? That's retarded. You thought you were better than the rest of us? So the rest of us that would be intimidated by the risk, you're somehow better than we are because you somehow knew it wasn't going to happen to you, even though it did? So you didn't know very well, did you? Anyway. I mean, they have no remorse for their villainous act. Yeah, so you could even get into that whole, you know, but all of that kind of social things have to change if the world's going to change. Those changes have to happen maybe before people get smart enough. You know, I hate to even say that. Before they get reconditioned. See, at least the new generation has some chance of hearing all of these arguments. Like some 10-year-old kid could accidentally see one of my videos and could say, yeah, that makes more sense than that religious crap my parents are preaching. Yeah, that's how I see the world too. I'm living here and I'm trapped. I'm forced to go to the institution, and I'm forced to do this and forced to do all these, forced to you know, become a Borg member and to, you know, march in this silly little stupid parade that doesn't make much sense. And so they're not going to be as hard to convince in the future, because there's going to be more people who acquired more cynicism because they heard more counter arguments. I mean, when I grow up, you only heard one voice. You know, there was only 2 channels on TV, and the 2 channels were the same channel, essentially, right? I mean, there was just no place to really get hit with any kind of wake-up call to reality. So you were just so droned with the fairy tales and the nonsense and the stupid social norms and all the other crapola that you thought that stuff really mattered. Some of it bled into you, and you became, oh yeah, I like having collars on my shirt. You know, you some of it screwed you up, because it became part of who you are, because it was just droned into you, and you really didn't think, well, yeah, I could have just this, I could have a folded collar, I could fold the collar inside out, and I could, you know, you just didn't know you had these choices. And at least people now, in this more Wild West kind of environment, have some hope of recognizing that the emperor's, you know, not wearing very good clothes, if any at all, and there's nothing really to admire about the culture or its direction or what it's doing or why it's doing it, that it's really a mockery. And I suppose presidents like Trump make that more obvious. Just as there's, the people become dumber and more buffoonery, and it just makes it obvious that this isn't this isn't about anything important, that the culture doesn't even have any integrity, that it's just a bunch of memes and a bunch of jargon. Make America swell again. Just give America a blowjob. I mean, it's just slogans, just bullshit. It doesn't have anything to do with anything real. Change. That's exactly like what we were doing before. Anyway, so it's probably enough. Not very enthusiastic. It's just all. This seems like it's just way too much work to get the simplest ideas into people's heads. But I mean, it really shouldn't be a complex conversation, right? I mean, certain parts of this, like every single person on Earth should agree that having a kid is a huge decision, not a small decision. It's a gigantic one. The implications are gigantic, and it should never be done recklessly by some 13-year-old shit for brain. And that you should have a certain level of competence in your knowing who the fuck you are before you decide you know how to make a new person. You haven't even become a person yet. You're not even functional in your society yet, and yet you think you can make people? I mean, everybody should be able to agree, well, that's not ideal. Yeah, that's not too good. So we should at least do everything we can to stop that crap. And especially around the world, because that crap is what's immigrating into your country and, keeping the human population bubble growing. And so you need to fix it. You need something real about it. You can't just say, oh, that's not right. That's not going to do it. Just walking around going, that's not right, isn't going to. You have to put up some of those signs. You have to do something real to discourage the behavior. You have to make at least some threats. Point your finger. We're coming to get you. Even if we don't come to get them, we have to at least imply that we might. Something to discourage it. To create an atmosphere where you have to give this some thought. Even if you believe in your little babbly God and all your little babbly much, it doesn't justify recklessness. And so you have to demonstrate that you've not just asked God if it's okay, but that you've created some capacity to be able to take care of the potential mess if that's what you end up creating. That you have some ability to clean it up. Alright. Yeah, so we'll call that a video. Yeah. So, till the next time, when I continue to do whatever this is. It's partially lamenting and partially strategy. Partially something else. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, so maybe I need like a top 10 list or something. I don't know. Well, anyway, so there are things that I guess should be on the top of the list of things that do work as arguments and things that do work in terms of creating people, giving them pause, and that's what you really want them to do, is to admit this is something that requires some thought, that it's not just some obvious free lunch, that maybe the free lunch is a trap. The sign, free lunch, have babies, no problem, good thing, you're wonderful, that maybe that sign is a lie, and it's really a roach motel, and nothing in there is going to have a good time. So anyway, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. People. Talking to people. So you have to do it some, it's no point. Just even the conversations have to be shows, right? I mean, the people have to have the right voice, and they have to have the right, engaging personality, and all this crap that shouldn't make any difference. It should be about what people are saying, And then the intellectuals put all of this goopy language on top of it. Well, what's the ontology of that concept? Or some sort of bullshit. You're just like, that's not going to solve the problem. using complex language isn't the solution. Anyway. Yuck.